Hi, in this screencast I'd like to demonstrate how to handle deploying to different stages like prod, dev, and testing. And to do that, I'll be showing how AWS Lambda handles versions and something called aliases. So in the last video we ran the npm run create command here, and if you were to look at the AWS Lambda using the dashboard, you would see a option like this to display what's called versions and aliases. So after you first create your Lambda function, you'll automatically have something called the latest, and it'll also create this little blue label here is what's called the alias. And this points to a version called the latest. So this is what you get. You don't have to do anything to have these available to you. But here you can see that version 1 was also created by virtue of running npm run create, and that a dev label or alias is pointing to version 1. So if you recall, switching back here to the package JSON, when you look at the create command that we ran, we indicated a version of dev right here. So that is the thing that actually created the label here that now points to a particular version of the AWS Lambda function. So that's what you get when you first create it. What I'd like to show you next is an example of, let's say that you were testing your Lambda and you'd like to promote it to the to prod. It's ready for production release. So what you would run here, you can see, is npm run deploy prod command, which I'll do down here in the command prompt. Deploy prod. So again, this is communicating with AWS Lambda, and it's going to be deploying a new version. You can see here in the response that it indicates that this is now version 2. Another helpful thing in this response is the URL. So you can see down here that it has a new URL with, it ends in prod as opposed to dev. So let's take that and just run a curl command using it. And we'll use that call endpoint that we created earlier just to echo back what the version and deployment stage is for this. So you can see here, it's kind of interesting. We got back a response of forbidden. This will happen occasionally when you kind of outrun the actual deployment of the new Lambda version. So I waited a couple seconds and I ran the call again. You'll see here the same call, I just waited a little bit longer. And now it does return what we would expect in the response. So you see here that we're now at version 2 and that we have a alias or label, a prod that points to that version. So looking back up here, if you were to look in the console at AWS, you would see something like this. So we still have a latest version, which is now equivalent to version 2. We have a new version 2 with the label of prod. So prod is pointing to 2. And you'll see here that dev is still pointing to 1, which is kind of what you would expect. Next, let's take a look and see what happens if you were to deploy a new dev version of this Lambda. So let's say that you're adding a new feature or making a bug fix to the function. So again, what you do here, I'm going to jump down to the command prompt, is run npm run and deploy :dev. And again, you'll see the new version has been incremented to 3, and we have an endpoint that we can call again using curl /call. And you can see that we have a version 3 and that our alias or label that's pointing to 3 is currently dev. And then just for completeness, let's take a look at prod, see where that stands. you can see that it's still pointing at version 2 here. And looking above, you can see here again that we have a new version of 3 with the alias or label pointing to that, and it's now one version ahead of the production version. So you would be working on your development version over here. You would still have your deployed production version here at version number 2. Finally, I would like to show you what happens when you run your end-to-end tests. I have a separate video where I will be describing one way to create end-to-end testing, but for this video, I'd just like to show you what happens with the aliases and versions when you run a test. So I'm jumping down again to the command prompt, running npm run test :e2e. And you can see here that both my tests have passed. And I also get a URL for the test itself. Jumping back up here, this is what I'd like to show you. So I have now a new label or alias of test, and what it does is it points to the latest version, which happens to be version 3 and happens to be the dev version. And I'm going to jump over here to the package.json just so you can see what's happening in this command here. So here, test e2e is setting the version to test. That's the thing that creates that label that's pointing to the latest version. And then here, this is simply the command that runs the tests that are located in the test folder here, and I'll be covering that again in a video that deals with testing in particular. The other thing just to caution you about is sometimes when you run this, you may occasionally get 403 errors or forbidden errors. Again, I think the way to handle those is to wait a couple seconds and just simply run the test again. It's a case where the Lambda function, the deployment hasn't completed fully. So just be aware of that. Sometimes you'll get these false failures and you just need to try to run the test again.